What is the purpose of a spoiler? In-flight spoilers aid in roll control. Ground spoilers are used after touchdown to decrease lift and increase drag. What absorbs the taxi shocks in an oleo shock strut? The compressed air or nitrogen? How much air or nitrogen should be put into an oleo shock strut? With the strut serviced with fluid and the filler plug in place and the weight of the aircraft on the strut, put in enough air or nitrogen to extend the piston to the height specified in the aircraft maintenance manual. What is the purpose of using an exerciser jack when servicing shock strut with fluid? The jack moves the piston up and down inside the cylinder to work all of the air out of the oil to be sure that the proper amount of oil is in the shock strut. What is a squat switch and where is it located? A landing gear safety switch that energizes a circuit to prevent the landing gear retraction handle from being moved to the retract position when weight is on the landing gear. It is located in the torsion links of one of the main landing gears. What kind of device is normally used as a sensor to detect the condition of a retractable landing gear? A precision micro switch. What is the purpose of the center cam in a nose wheel shock strut? The centering cam forces the nose wheel straight back with the strut before it is retracted into the nose wheel. What absorbs the initial landing impact in an oleo shock strut? The transfer from oil from one compartment to another through a metered orifice. What would cause the warning horn to sound when the throttles are pulled back, reducing the engine power for landing? The warning horn will sound if any of the landing gears are not down and locked. What is indicated by a red light in the landing gear position indication portion of the annunciator panel? The red light indicates that the landing gear is not in a safe condition for landing. What information is given to a pilot to indicate that all of the landing gears are down and locked? 3 green lights are used on most aircraft to indicate that all 3 landing gears are down and locked. What are the 3 basic brake actuating systems? The independent system, the booster system, and the power brake system. What kind of filter is a micronic filter? A filter with a special paper element. What is a double action pump? A double action pump delivers fluid with a movement of the pump handle in both directions. Why do most engine-driven hydraulic pumps have a shear section in their drive couplings? If the pump should seize, the shear section will break, disconnecting the pump from the engine and preventing further damage. What are the 2 basic types of hydraulic fluid in modern aircraft? Mineral-based fluid and phosphate ester-based fluid. Does the main hydraulic pump take its fluid from the bottom of the reservoir or from a standpipe? The main pump normally takes its fluid from a standpipe, while the emergency pump takes its fluid from the bottom of the reservoir. If a break in the system should allow the main pump to pump all its fluid overboard, there will still be enough fluid in the reservoir to allow the emergency system to extend the landing gear and actuate the brakes. Why are some hydraulic reservoirs pressurized? Pressurization ensures that the fluid will be supplied to the inlet of the pumps at high altitude where there is not enough atmospheric pressure to do this. What are 2 ways aircraft hydraulic reservoirs may be pressurized? By an aspirator in the fluid return line or by bleed air from one of the engine compressors? What is used to flush a hydraulic system that uses SkyDraw hydraulic fluid? Trichloroethylene or the solvent recommended by aircraft manufacturer? What is used to flush hydraulic system that uses mineral-based hydraulic fluid? Naphtha, Varsol, or Stoddard solvent? Where can you find the type of hydraulic fluid required for a particular aircraft? The maintenance manual for the aircraft. This information is also on a placard on the system's reservoir. What type of pump is a gear pump considered? Constant displacement, high pressure pump. What type of pump is a piston pump with a variable cam plate considered? Variable displacement with constant pressure. What is the purpose of an accumulator in an aircraft hydraulic system? The accumulator holds pressure on the hydraulic fluid in the system. The pressure is held by compressed air and nitrogen acting on the fluid through a bladder, a diaphragm, or a piston. What is a single-action hydraulic actuating cylinder? A linear actuating cylinder that uses hydraulic fluid under pressure to move the piston in only one direction. The piston is returned by a spring. What is the difference between a single-acting and double-acting hand pump? Single-action hand pumps move fluid in only one direction of the handle operation. Double-acting hand pumps move fluid on both directions of handle movement. If a system requires a lower pressure than system pressure, what type of valve is used? A pressure reducer valve. What is the purpose of an orifice check valve in an aircraft hydraulic system? An orifice check valve allows full flow of fluid in one direction through the valve, but restricts the flow in the opposite direction. What is the difference in function between pressure regulator and pressure relief valve? Pressure regulators control overall system pressure. Pressure relief valves act as backup to pressure regulator, prevent overpressure damage to the system and components. What does an unloading valve do in a hydraulic system? The unloading valve or pressure regulator controls system pressure by shifting the pump outlet fluid from the pressurized system back into the reservoir. When the system pressure is high enough, the fluid circulates with very little load on the pump until the system pressure drops to the regulator kick-in valve. The pump then forces fluid into the system until the pressure builds back up to the regulator kick-out valve. What is the difference in function between a pressure regulator and a pressure relief valve? Pressure regulators control overall system pressure. Pressure relief valves act as a backup to the pressure regulator to prevent overpressure damage to the system and components. How is the heat removed from an aircraft cabin with a vapor cycle air conditioning system? Cabin heat is absorbed by the refrigerant in the evaporator, then carried outside the aircraft where it is given to the outside air in the condenser. What produces the cool air in a vapor cycle air conditioning system? Warm cabin air is blown across the evaporator where its heat is transferred into the refrigerant. The air that leaves the evaporator is cool. What is used as the refrigerant in a vapor cycle air conditioning system? Freon type liquid refrigerant known as R12 or R13-4A. What is the state of the refrigerant as it leaves the air compressor? High pressure gas. What is the state of refrigerant as it leaves the condenser? High pressure liquid. What is the state of the refrigerant as it leaves a thermostatic expansion valve? Low pressure liquid. What is the state of refrigerant as it leaves the evaporator? Low pressure vapor. How is the compressor lubricated? Refrigeration oil is mixed with the refrigerant and it circulates through the compressor and the entire system. What is the function of the thermostatic expansion valve? It meters just enough liquid refrigerant into the evaporator that all of it will be evaporated by the time it leaves the evaporator coils. How is refrigerant put into the system? Through service valves on the low side of the system using a manifold gauge set. How should the components in the low side of a properly operating vapor cycle cooling system feel? They should feel cool. How is a vapor cycle cooling system checked for refrigerant leaks? Hold the probe of an electronic leak detector below any suspect fitting or component. If there is a leak, the tone of the sound produced by the detector will change. What safety equipment should be worn when charging a vapor cycle cooling system? Safety face shield that protects the entire face. What are two types of air conditioning systems that may be installed on an aircraft? Air cycle systems and vapor cycle systems. Where does the warm air come from that is used to heat the cabin of a large jet transport aircraft? Warm engine compressor bleed air is used. Where is the first place the hot compressor bleed air gives up some of its heat in an air cycle cooling system? In the primary heat exchanger. Where is the first place the hot compressor bleed air gives up some of its heat in the air cycle cooling system? In the primary heat exchanger. What is the function of the air cycle machine in an air cycle cooling system? The centrifugal compressor increases the pressure of temperature of the bleed air. This high temperature air gives up some of its heat in the secondary heat exchanger, and a great deal more as it drives the expansion turbine. It leaves the expansion turbine as cold air. Why must air cycle conditioning systems incorporate water separator? The rapid cooling of the air in the expansion turbine causes the moisture to condense in the form of fog. The moisture is trapped in the moisture separator before the air is released into the cabin. How is the temperature of the air produced by an air cycle cooling system controlled? By a temperature control valve, which mixes the engine compressor bleed air with cold air from the expansion turbine. What are 3 ways supplemental oxygen can be carried in an aircraft? As high pressure gas in its liquid form, and as a solid in the form of chemical candle. What is a continuous flow oxygen system? An oxygen system that continuously flows a metered amount of oxygen into the mask. What is a pressure demand oxygen system? An oxygen system that flows oxygen to the mask only when the wearer of the mask inhales. Above a specified altitude, the regulator meters oxygen under pressure into the mask when the wearer inhales. Where does the system descriptions found for enunciator indications and the meaning of the associated warnings, cautions, and advisory lights? In the pilot's operating handbook, airplane flight manual, and the aircraft instructions for continued airworthiness. What type of system is used to indicate the position of the wing flaps? A resistance type remote indication system such as the DC Selson system. What information is shown by the wing flap position indicator? The number of degrees the flaps are lowered. On what 2 frequencies does the emergency locator transmitter operate? 121.5 and 243 megahertz. Where is the ELT transmitter normally located on an aircraft? In the tail of the aircraft or as far aft as possible, so it will be the least likely to be damaged in a crash. How would the ELT batteries be replaced or recharged? When the transmitter has been in use for more than 1 cumulative hour, or when 50% of their useful life or charge has expired. How can you know when an ELT battery must be replaced or recharged? By the date marked on the outside of the transmitter. How often must ELTs be inspected for proper installation, battery corrosion, operation of the controls and sensor, and the presence of the radiated signal? Every 12 months. What causes the ELT to actuate? An inertia switch that detects an impact parallel to the longitudinal axis of the aircraft, as would occur in a crash. How is an ELT tested to determine that it is working? Actuate the test switch and listen to 121.5 or 243 megahertz. Make the test during the first 5 minutes of the hour and do not allow the ELT to operate for more than 3 sweeps. If the ELT is operated outside of this time frame, you should contact the control tower before conducting the test. What is the basic purpose of an autopilot? It frees human pilot from continuous having to fly the aircraft and flies with a high degree of precision. It also couples with various electronic navigational aids. What are the basic subsystems of an automatic flight control system? Command, error sensing, correction, and follow-up. What type of device is normally used in the error sensing subsystem? Gyros. What are 3 types of servos that are used in the correction of the subsystem? Hydraulic, pneumatic, and electric. What is the purpose of the follow-up subsystem in an autopilot? It stops the control movement when the surface has deflected the proper amount for the signal sent by the error sensor. Why are fuel tanks divided into compartments or baffles installed in them? The compartments or baffles keep the fuel from surging back and forth as the aircraft changes its altitude in flight. How is a fuel leak indicated on a reciprocated engine-powered aircraft? The dye in the gasoline stains the area around the leak. What is the function of the sump in a fuel tank? The sump collects water and contaminants and will have a drain to remove them. What are the 3 different types of fuel tanks? built-up tanks, integral tanks, and bladder tanks. What problem can occur in a bladder tank with a blocked vent? The tank can collapse and block the fuel outlet due to pressure differential between the atmosphere and the tank. How do you prepare an aluminum fuel tank for welding? Remove all fuel, wash with hot water and detergent, and purge with live steam for at least 30 minutes. After welding an aluminum fuel tank, to what pressure should the tank be tested? 3.5 psi. What size generator must be used in the aircraft electrical system if its connected electrical load is 30 amps and there is no way of monitoring the generator output? When monitoring is not practical, the total continuous connected electrical load must be no more than 80% of the rated generator output. This would require a generator with a rating of 37.5 amps. Practically, a 40 amp generator would be installed. What is meant by flashing the field of a generator? Restoring the residual magnetism to the frame of the generator. This is done by passing battery current through the field coils in the direction it normally flows when the generator is operating. What is meant by paralleling the generators in a multi-engine aircraft? Adjusting the voltage regulators so all generators share electric load equally. What are three types of voltage regulators used in aircraft generators? Vibrator type, carbon pile type, and solid state type. What does a constant speed drive unit maintain a constant output frequency of the AC generator? By maintaining a constant speed of the generator as the engine speed varies. What is an integrated drive generator? When a constant speed drive is combined within the alternator housing, the assembly is known as an IDG. What is meant by trip-free circuit breaker? Circuit breaker that cannot be closed while a fault exists, regardless of the position of the operating handle. What is meant by slow blow fuse? A fuse that will allow more current than its rating to flow for a short period of time, but will open the circuit if more than its rated current continues to flow. What is the function of a fuse or circuit breaker in an aircraft? Electrical circuit. It protects the wiring from an excess amount of current. It will open the circuit if enough current flows to heat the wire. What are two principles upon which circuit breakers operate? Magnetic circuit breakers open a circuit when the current creates a strong enough magnetic field. Thermal circuit breakers open a circuit when the current causes enough heat. What circuit in an aircraft electrical system is not required to have circuit protected device? The main circuit for starter motors used during starting only. Is an automatic reset circuit breaker approved for aircraft electrical circuits? No, a manual operation is needed to restore service after the circuit breaker has tripped. How does a vibrator type voltage regulator maintain a constant voltage? When the voltage rises above desired value, an electromagnetic relay opens and inserts a resistor in the generator field circuit, decreasing the field current and lowering the generator output voltage. What two components are normally housed with a vibrator voltage regulator in a single unit generator control? A current limiter and a reverse current cutout relay.